But I went out and got a it's just like crazy. I said.
We're going to kick off our next session. Everyone wants to take a seat, please. All right. I'm going to pass it over to Howard, who's going to introduce our next panel.
Hey, good morning. I am Howard Booth. I'm the VP of Strategic Services with Vergence. I'm also the VP of Membership for FCA Indiana. Before I do introduce the AI panel, I have to, as part of my job, plug FCA Indiana just a little bit. We have a table out front. Becoming a member does access you to all of the events we do throughout the year, and also allows you to access FCA International and all the services and capabilities that they have. So I recommend you get with one of our officers or check out the materials we have out front there and get involved. It's a good organization, and you'll get more benefit out of it if you become a member. I get the opportunity to introduce the AI panel. So I believe they are all here. Good. All right, so let's start with Ms. Meg Hart. She's the Acting Chief Information Officer for the Defense Contract Audit Agency. In that role, she's modernizing the DCAA mission with artificial intelligence, data analytics, and RPA. Previously, she was the Director of Enterprise Services at INT for DFAS, and she's also served as the Senior Information Security Officer for DFAS. Mr. Keith Strom. Keith is the Chief AI Product Engineer for DFAS, working in the Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence. He's leading the development of AI cloud environments with web applications. He also sits on multiple boards for the CDAO, OSD, Air Force for data scientists and data engineer roles and requirements. He works with DHA, DOI, and the VA on AI efforts, and he is a Navy veteran. Mr. Dave Vennergrund. Dave is the AI and Data Insights VP for GDIT. In that role, he leads AI and data insights consulting practices, which focuses on artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud-native analytics, data science, enterprise data modernization. And finally, Mr. Tony Russell. Tony is the project manager for CSCI Consulting, supporting the DFAS Emerging Capabilities and Systems Defense Agency Initiative DAI programs for 8 years. He's also a member of the data conversion team responsible for strategy preparation and specifications for converting legacy data into DAI, and he is our moderator today.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your break. So we are going to talk now about AI and some of the best practices for artificial intelligence. We're going to follow the same format from before, where we'll have some previously submitted questions that they'll answer, and then towards the end we'll have a Q&A session. So our first question is actually a two-part question. Can each of you share your journey into AI, both personally and within your organization, and what inspired you to dive into this field?
Is this on? Cool. Getting into AI, I'll I'll start off with the educated wish, right, of what I had. But getting into AI, started off with data analytics. I was in Data Analytics Center of Excellence. Looking at what is kind of growing in the field of the industry. AI was an emerging technology, but it was something that was misunderstood. So my drive was then to go get educated in. I went to Ohio State. From there, had some opportunities at DFAS where we have the Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence. We're pretty driven. I think we're probably a leader in the DoD in AI and what we have. And I'll talk a little bit probably more about that as far as our bigger groups. But getting into it, it was just kind of, I knew it was an emerging piece getting out there.
So I know most of you because I worked at DFAS for 18 years and I am just recently over at DCAA. So I watched the AI journey at DFAS and saw how data can truly drive business and the benefits to technology being at the table, at boardroom discussions, at strategy conversations. So now at DCAA, that is my challenge. We are very new to adopting modern technology and are trying to pave that path to get to AI and RPA. So I will say where I'm at is in its infancy, but I come with the knowledge of the transformative business practices that can come with modern technology such as AI.
Thank you. So I come at it from, let's see, I was bitten by an AI spider. I come to it honestly. I was a computer scientist at Arizona State, working for GDIT, trying to debug central office switches, and we're getting flooded with error messages. So we built expert systems. I got a master's degree in AI and went on from there to build lots of expert systems, which are now gone the way of the dinosaur. I had one contract with the Navy Surface Weapons Center detecting buried unexploded ordnance that we'd buried. We buried it with nails and lawn chairs and other things, other false targets. So we knew the answer key, and then competitors came in and gave us their data. We were able to use machine learning algorithms, genetic algorithms, and for the first time in 10 years I didn't have to talk to an expert and write down expert system rules. And that's what changed my life. Now in my organization, we've been applying, the GDIT's been applying machine learning to fraud detection, income tax fraud, intelligence analysis for more than 2 decades. But we've been doing it low and slow, right? And all of a sudden the world explodes with generative AI. And we're in the corner going, we told you. And they're like, you didn't really tell us. So either I'm a Cassandra, like I can predict the future, but no one will listen to me, or we just weren't effective in messaging how important AI would be. So that's kind of the journey for me and my company.
Thank you. Our next question is, what strategies have you used when commuting with stakeholders or leadership to secure their buy-in for AI initiative? What arguments resonate with the most decision makers?
Sure, so working with shareholders. So I think first part about it is communicating what AI can do and what AI can't do. Right, so there's a big mystery around what tools are that are capable of, and will it evolve, and how does it scope and scale. A big part of that is partnering with your leadership and having them understand too as well, like 50% of projects most times in AI will fail. So that's just part of the business that we deal with. If we're going to fail, we're going to fail quick, and then we just kill a project and we move on to the next one. It's just something that we kind of try to communicate over and above of what we're trying to do, and we're really trying to solve problems with use cases. So working with our shareholders, we really want to make sure that the business case meets the need, and that once we're done with the product, it actually does what it's supposed to do.
So I'll take a slightly different angle, and I'll further what Mr. Early said in the discussion about data, that when you are implementing technology, when you are trying to get buy-in for technology, you have to know your stakeholders. And for most of us, our stakeholders are not IT folks, right? So for me now, they're auditors, which I find even more difficult than accountants and financial analysts, but that's another conversation. So you speak in their terms, right? And then you also got to break the mold of how projects were traditionally looked at. So oftentimes when you bring something new to the table, you're asked, what's the ROI, right? Where do I get my money back from this project? And with AI and any undefined technology, that's really difficult. You've got to have the infrastructure to even start with AI, right? And that's going to be a sunk cost. So then how do you sell it? You got to sell it in terms of not only the threat of remaining competitive and look, everybody else is doing it, so we should do it, but how does it become a business multiplier for your company, for your stakeholders? And not in terms of technology, but sell the story, right? Like that, to me, that resonates more than anything. 10 years ago, this is how we would have done X process. Now, let me tell you the story of Jim, who is a technician, but he can now focus on decision making because he's not having to do some of the more manual tasks, right? So how do we make not only people more effective at their jobs, the business processes more effective, and then sell that from the value standpoint. So for me, it's speaking in business terms, which I did not grow up in IT. I love IT, but 15 years ago, I was a financial analyst, and I will tell you, having that background has helped me because I can speak to both sides of the table. But if you walk in with the culture of, you just got to do it, otherwise you're going to be behind, and get very technical, you've lost your support before you even started.
I agree. Yeah, great points. I'll try to add some things around the edge. For Mr. earlier today, don't talk tech, talk use cases, right? And one way to talk use case, two ways to talk about use cases is one, keep an inventory and have good stories on hand to share. The other is the use cases and stories are coming at us faster than we can keep track. And why is that happening? Because of guerrilla AI and the use of AI by all of us in this room on the cloud to do fun work, homework, kids' work, right? Everyone's coming at this with some expectations. You've probably, many of you have jumped into that swimming pool, and you can see the value in the productivity. Those use cases are coming at us as well. I would also stretch the fact that AI lives and breathes on data, and that when you have a use case or a mission need, you don't always need AI. Perhaps a better data preparation solution or data integration solution gets you 9/10 of the way there, or a dashboard might be useful. So I would say use the full capability set that is included in data science and AI, and just focus on the problem, focus on the use case, and focus on the data that's available, and then choose the right technology, but don't lead with that technology.
I did just want to add on to one thing that Keith said, because I think it's so very important. As you are working with your stakeholders, there's got to be some teaching that comes with that, though, right? So you can talk about AI and you can tell the story and you can tell it in terms of to business, but you've got to upskill your organization enough that they even know what you're talking about. And so, for example, working on a slide deck to present to our executive council. And my director of AI is showing me what he put together. And he's trying to explain the difference between machine learning and AI. And the picture that he chose for AI was this digital head with like data blocks coming off of it. And I was like, whoa, Justin, you're gonna scare people, okay? Like, they still think AI is like Terminator stuff, right? Like, so, can we show like a neural network or something showing, connections or things like that? Because you still do have those folks that think that, AI humanoids are gonna take over the world. And maybe they will, I don't know. But that's not where we are right now. That's not what we're trying to sell right now. So being very intentional with your communication is so very important.
Thank you. There's a common belief that more data equals better insight. How do you balance the quantity of data and the quality of insight?
Sure. when looking at data, I'll speak specifically, like, we'll talk about fraud, right? You can have all the data in the world to look at fraud, but what we're finding as we're looking at fraud in today's kind of real world examples is heuristics, right? So what behaviors are people doing online to look at specifically when they're a bad actor? How often are they going, processing an overall transaction? That's an important overall statistic. Anything else that kind of goes along with the behavior of what a good actor is versus a bad actor, that's what we're looking for. And cutting that down allows us then to really focus and hone in on when we do see a bad transaction. If we over inundate ourselves with too much data, then we don't know exactly what to program as far as a model. In AI, what we're looking to do is create a model where we can say, this is what fraud looks like, computer, go find this exact overall replicating piece, so then we can have what fraud is and it can find it. If we give it too much data, then it doesn't know what fraud looks like because everything looks the same, or there's too many similarities in what we're doing. So we're trying to cut down the data as much as possible, but have enough to make a business decision at the end of the day for an investigator or for something else. So I think that's one good case.
Sure.
Yeah, so this is a two-sided coin. We're living in an era now where deep learning and large language models exist because of a collection called ImageNet, which is millions of labeled images that were freely done open source contest, open source collaboration in the 2009 to 2010. With that labeled data, competitors were able to train models to detect objects, pencils, faces, posts, chairs, what have you. So that was a lot of data. It took a lot of data tagging to get to the point of being able to build those models, and then a revolution in an architecture, deep learning structure, stacked neural networks, which took us to a new architecture, and GPUs to run them on, and cloud resources to buy them from, rent them from instead of buying them, your sunk costs, right? So those things all came together and changed our world. Deep learning changed our world. It was rapidly followed by transformers and large language models, which are trained on huge data sets, billions, 13 billion, 20 billion, 200 billion, coming up to a terabyte of parameters, which is a fun way of saying words. Flipping that around, if you're building a proof or a project and you want to detect fraud or label skin cancer images or predict when refugees will finally relocate to the United States or generate operational orders from existing knowledge base of operational orders, or be able to quote policy from tax law or program integrity at CMS, you want a focused data set, a smaller data set. You don't want to collect the world, you don't want to boil the ocean. In fact, I've seen over my career, many projects just hit the shoals because they wanted to collect all the data, clean it all, represent it all, and then build their analytics. I would caution us all to go the other way. What's your analytic? What data does it need?
So I'll jump on what you were saying, because that was kind of where I was going, is that I think one of the very positive benefits of AI is, in order to use it for things like even data analytics, for example, you no longer have to have this very clean data set where everything is tagged perfectly. That was a huge barrier to entry for so long for so many organizations. When you think about the older systems that they're using and how they've used data in the past, and so I think AI allows you to be more efficient with the data that you have. But I will say, this is my opinion, Meg Hart's not DCAA's, but I do think that we are coming onto a very big change in how data has been looked at. And what I mean is, no longer can you just say, this is my agency's data and I'm not going to share it. Or this is proprietary. And yes, of course, you will still always have those things that you may not be able to share, but for the most part, business information as it's shared makes these AI models much stronger and much more accurate And we come upon, especially with the DoD and Ms. Reed talking about how, you know, we are part of the fourth estate, right? So our data is going to sit in Advana in that section, not in its own section. There's benefit to that, right? Because being able to utilize each other's data, utilize each other's knowledge, makes these models that much more effective, which then further sells the case for AI, right? But if you only have a very narrow data set and want to just operate with that narrow data set, you're probably going to fail with your first AI models. They're just not going to work well, and they're not going to do what you think they're going to do.
Anything else?
I'm good.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, I
go ahead.
do want to add some hope, right? If you combine those two ideas, right, a small focused data set and a foundational large language model, you kind of get the best of both worlds. And maybe it's everything in the world about how to conduct an audit, and that's it. It's a small data set, and nothing from anyone else. You could build an assistant, a virtual assistant that could evaluate audits, that could generate audit plans, that could review audits for clarity, pick your best audits, show it bad audits and good ones and say, hey, these are bad, these are good, here's some raw data, generate an audit report for me. So I would not argue the point, but to say by combining a small data set with a foundational model, which is very large, I'm proving your point.
Thank you. Cybersecurity concerns are the forefront of any AI implementation. What does a robust cybersecurity strategy look like in an AI-driven environment?
I guess I have the mic.
We're switching it up.
All right, so I love cybersecurity. It is my IT background as a prior CISO. It is always on my mind. So a few points I'll make from that. Just like with the change management on teaching your employees, your leadership, your business partners, the language of technology, you also have to teach them the fact that they are a part of cybersecurity. No longer is cybersecurity just an IT function. It is imperative to daily business. So that's part of it. It's the change management and that knowledge. And then I'll just use a buzzword for AI. You are always going to have bad actors that are going to find ways to exploit. I read something the other day, we're no longer living in the era of AI, we are living in the era of, scammers, basically, right? Like, look at how different and how quickly things have adapted. And so with that, your employee knowledge, which then you also drive with policy and guardrails, but zero trust. Zero trust, for those of you that don't know, the traditional security traditional security paradigm is, guard your perimeter. With zero trust, you're guarding everything. Nothing is trusted, right? So to me, although you do have cyber tools that use AI to filter out events and the noise maybe, and also help you to compartmentalize if you have situations that happen, the only way you truly stop catastrophe in this day and age is by having the guardrails around everything, and at every layer, at every system, at every user. You verify. There is no trust that things are good, because we know bad actors are going to exploit those trusts as soon as they see them, probably before you even know about them.
Yeah, with that, I can say with having an ATO being in the cloud environment, I hear a lot about like developers and engineers and creating AI solutions, and that is half of what I'll say the house is. The other half of the house is your ISM, ISO, SM. People that you hire to make sure that your data is secure and that you're running the proper overall governance behind this. So with that, you have then your RBAC, which you're making sure people have proper access to proper data. You're making sure then as well that the data isn't combined and you have to reclassify that data too. There's a lot that goes along with the data in the environment that is on the cybersecurity side that is not seen by a lot of folks. They see all the cool toys, they see all the flashy stuff. But behind the scenes, you know, when we put something in production, every month it must be reviewed as far as its wire diagram, who has access to it, what reports have gone out about it. We have Sentinel that's behind it. We have Defender for Cloud that's looking at the cybersecurity. So I guess just to underline, cybersecurity is of the utmost importance to us, and we're not only hiring and looking at, we'll say, developers and new AI ideas. We're saying, how can we protect what data we have going forward? As we were talking about, like the Air Force and the Army, you know, as we have things going on overseas, we have things going on in our financial world. Mr. Gillison was pretty adamant of, you can use finance as a weapon. Well, how are you protecting the finance of the United States government so that it's not, you know, taken advantage of by bad actors, or we have systems that go down? There's not only considerations, I'll say, to the people that, you know, we pay from retirement, military, other folks, but in a bigger, broader picture, if we go to full cloud environments, how are we protecting it? What are our outside sources? Are there outside APIs? Things of that nature too as well. So yeah, it's the other side of the house is the cybersecurity that we really try to hire and recruit the best folks to as well for.
Yeah, I like to echo that. It is a team sport. It takes the IT wonks who want to build and deploy cool solutions with the ISOs and ISMs and all the other all the security infrastructure. And fundamentally, that's driven by two things. One is a risk governance construct and a risk management construct and a governance construct. So at GDIT, any AI piece of work needs to go through a review process, an ingestion process, and it needs to get signed off. But then it's monitored and it's watched, right? And there's audits conducted on it, right? So that's policy. On the automation side, I don't know if we were talking about it, but zero trust is such a hard description for what it really is. I loved your description. I don't care for buzzwords that you have to define, right? So zero trust is this really great idea that you only provision people for or services or people for the things that they need, right? So if you get into someone's account, well, you're provisioned with their things. But my point is that the moat idea is gone. We identify what resources and services are available to people, and we manage those and monitor them. And if those services show up in a vulnerability scan, we have to remediate them. Our CISO sends us lovely notes every Friday saying, and best practices. This person has not updated their keys in 7 weeks, or this person has conducted activities as admin instead of as a developer, right? So those are all part and parcel of good hygiene. And the last thing I would add is, for the guerrillas who are doing this work, you need a safety training. You need to teach people not to put their data in the public cloud, not to put government data or proprietary data in the government cloud, not to ask questions that will embarrass their company or the US government or the services. You know, you need just safety training that's a little different than the compliance security training we get every year. You know, recognizing phishing and all that. This is using AI safely and not harming our country, our brand. Thank you.
Looking ahead, where do you see AI making the biggest strides in the near future?
What I see as far as within DFAS and strides in AI, I'll mention we have partnered with Microsoft, and in this partnership with Microsoft, we're taking on, it's called a greenhouse project. So the biggest innovations that we've seen in AI have to do with LLMs, large language models, ChatGPT, OpenAI, things of that nature. So the future really is, how are you not only using that as we'll say a singular tool, but how are you actually combining it in your workloads and in your solutions? So the one that I'll mention with the greenhouse, where they're Microsoft is actually flying some developers in. We're gonna have some developers go to actually here to Indianapolis. Our problem was that W-2s, there was a tax law calculation that was not accounted for. It happened in Puerto Rico. You may think, okay, fine, not that big of a deal, but it was affected 27,000 people. So 27,000 W-2s needed to be redone, had a calculation of over $48 million as far as an impact to our customers. So it's a big deal. When we brought this use case to Microsoft, we said, okay, can we actually use some tools, Beautiful Soup, some other web scraping tools, and go out to particular sites. So state sites where they actually post tax calculations. Okay, so if we can go to those sites, we can web scrape. Can we train a model to actually learn what a tax calculation is? So it reads it, it understands, hey, look, this is a law change. The current tax rate is X, it needs to be X plus 1. Then it comes back, so the large language model then hooks up to the web scraping piece. It then says, change this overall tax calculation. A report goes out, and then DCIPS is now updated with the new tax overall law. So this was a very manual process that we were doing, where somebody just had to go to the website and say, okay, I need to comprehend this. Do I have the experience to do so? Now we're actually just going to have the LLM do this. It was just very much hard and difficult work. That was just, what website do I go to? How often do I go to it? We're going to be able to press a button. It's going to go to the website, scrape it, read it, come out with a report and say, okay, update that tax. So we see these things kind of working too as well. I mean, we have other projects that we have with LLMs that we're going to hook up to a bot as well. So then if you need to go gather data, have it read, have a decision kind of put into a report for decision makers to make, that's what's going to happen. So the future of what we're seeing in AI, we kind of have two buckets. We have AI stuff, fraud detection, we have sentiment analysis, we have vision where we can read things and do other things like that. But then it's going to go to the second bucket, which is what can you do with the large language models like ChatGPT and other things like that, and do it safely. And that's what we're really working now with Microsoft. We have a .gov overall site, so OpenAI finally came IL5 compliant. We're working with them to see, okay, now what do we do with it? We at the agency have shut down ChatGPT, anything else that's public. Keeps your IPs, keeps your overall, anything that you're putting in. So we're trying to get to a point where we have this new technology and we're using it safe. And I think that links to the cybersecurity piece that we were talking about. I have folks that want to look and see what you're posting out there. As we talk about enemies and things like that we're trying to protect against, it's not that hard to put certain things together that you're putting out there on ChatGPT of, well, they're doing this and this, so that means they must be doing XYZ with so much money or funding or things of that nature.
So I'll take this question in two parts. The first part, I'll talk a little bit tactically from the mission where I'm at right now. So as the Defense Contract Audit Agency, we are very involved with DoD contracts and the acquisition community, and have access to a ton of data from those contracts. But then what do you do with it, right? So how do we then help the department, our nation, be more effective? Well, there's a lot of opportunity there. You could look at, hey, the fact that we can now predict that certain airline parts airplane parts or gas or whatever from these pricing and these contracts is going to do X, Y, and Z in the future, right? You can, give more of a, let's help you make decisions as the warfighter with financial data in a way that we were never able to do before, because we, can use AI to help with that decision-making process. But then that just goes to where I'll go, which I'm sorry, but I'm going to go a little bit philosophical on you, that 10 years ago we were seeing kids out of college that were used to doing everything on their phones, right? And they struggled to do things in Microsoft Office. That's another conversation. But here we are now with this next generation. I have a son that is a freshman in high school, and to him, AI has almost already, in a few short years, become part of his daily life. He plays computer games online, he looks up questions on ChatGPT for schoolwork. It's not just going out to sources that are good anymore, like, we used to have to at least cite the source and then it couldn't be like Wikipedia or something like that. Now they're using AI to put the information together. And you're seeing in academia them embrace that, right? Like, so if this is the future, then how do we teach children how to do this responsibly? Yes, you still have to cite your work. You also have to know where that information is coming from. Does it make sense? But that's our world, and that's going to continue to be our world, where the younger generation coming into the workforce just expects to have data available to them, and not only available to them, but make it work for them, right? So it's no longer, where can I find this information, or where can I find this website? they just type it in. They know that AI will find that for them. But then how do they then use that information, and then how does that affect your workforce going forward? How does that affect your business going forward and your mission going forward? And that's where the guardrails and policy, of course, come into play. But I mean, future of AI, sky's the limit, right? Like, we could define projects, and I know Keith has some really great ideas on projects, but the reality is that connecting information from everything in life is really gonna be a part of your business. You know, whether you want it to or not, it probably already is, just the way that people consume information. Compare that to 20, 30 years ago, how people consumed information, right? It's just there at a touch of a fingertip. So recognizing that and embracing that is the future for AI, I think.
Yeah, I love that benefit. Yeah, I wonder if our collective IQ has risen. That's kind of your postulate. Let's see, I'm going to answer this two ways. The technical way, which you're not supposed to do, and then I'll tell some stories. The technical way is we've gone from expert system rules to machine learning algorithms to deep learning algorithms to transformers, which are large language models, and generative AI. So there's this technical continuum, and all of those technologies, except expert systems, all have a place still today. What's next? I don't know. Chain of reasoning, perhaps. Something that we don't know, but it's going to come. It's going to change the world. I just don't know what it is. On the applied side, I see three really hot topics that our customers across intelligence, federal civilian, and the services are asking for, and the one is the bots, right? These generative AI solutions built around a body of knowledge. You could call them domain-specific assistants. They're built on a retrieval augmentation generation architecture, nicknamed RAG, and or fine-tuning. We are seeing the demand for those solutions explode. Everyone's going to have one, everyone wants one. Our sister company, GD Mission Systems, put up an internal sandbox, opened up the door to anyone to put any repository in there, and they've got over 3,000 users and 600 use cases. Everything from how to fill out a travel request and how to get a travel request that's been denied approved, all the way through how to develop software, how to design a database structure, how to conduct data science, exploratory data analytics on a CSV file or a large database. So we're going to see those RAG solutions everywhere. Your organizations will have 2, 3, 10, 20 in the next few years. So being able to build those effectively, safely, in a sandbox or whatever controlled environment you have, that's one. 2, software development. I kind of touched on it, but AI-assisted software development and design and testing, documentation, translation, refactoring, that's going to be huge. It's going to improve our software base across the company, across the nation. And number 3 is, it's going to elude me now because I said 3. The third area, I think, I'll come back to it with the next question.
But I think as well, if you really looked at it just from a perspective of, from the can, right? Canned foods that used to be out there, right, to the can opener was over 40 years until they invented the can opener. Right? So that's a history lesson that we say, like, well, why didn't we think of the can opener? Like, why were we opening these up with axes? That's what we're talking about with LLMs and other stuff today. We don't know your job, but we want to come out and say, okay, give us a use case that actually this LLM can apply to. Like, why didn't we think of using it? That's going to be like an aha moment of like, yeah, we were opening this can with axes.
All right, I remember. My memory came back. Sorry, I took an early flight this morning. Or actually, this might be me. I'm not going to blame American Airlines. Customer care centers, right? That's important to many of you here. They are going to be revolutionized by what I just mentioned before, these domain-specific agents that can help answer questions. But what we're seeing here is an overlaying architecture where there's an orchestration layer that can coordinate a field of experts. So instead of calling, for example, calling the tax, IRS for some tax advice, you might get your personal tax history, some tax code, a tax form, but those experts are stovepiped today. What we want to do is build experts that can, in each of those stovepipes, but also be orchestrated by someone who can help that customer through the experience. So you have a total view of the customer care experience. That's going to be really big, because people are knocking on that door right now. The vendors who sell customer care solutions are going to adopt that, and the people who don't have those solutions are going to build one-offs. So you'll see that, I think, a lot of those.
Excellent. Well, that concludes our pre-established questions. We'd like to open up the Q&A for the audience members. So is there anyone out there that would like to ask the panel a question?
Scott Pickett from CSCI. I'm curious if you could speak about the probability aspect of an LLM and the fact that some of those results are not accurate, they actually hallucinate, and they won't have the quality that you'd expect. You have to have seen that when you've run that. And how that would apply to mission critical systems. What type of QA boundaries are you putting?
Yeah, I'll take a quick, and I mean, we would probably both hit this. We were talking about this before. So the solution there is the RAG, right? The retrieval augmented piece of this. So where if you had an LLM that only had, we'll say, DFAS, HR document, and policies. That's it. That's all it knows. That's all you're going to get out of it. The only piece, right? So that's the we'll say the small solution there. The training portion of that and the step forward is then in the prompt engineering, right? Because if I ask that thing, even just with a couple different words, I'm going to get a slightly different answer to my customer perspective. So RAGs would be the quick solution.
So we were what drove us to this solution was the question, how do we know how good this result is, right? Because these are generated results, so it takes humans a long time to review them and score them, right? So we don't have a score key. So what we did was we found evaluator functions, Ragus being one of the best. It's an LLM that can judge another LLM. And how does it do that? It compares the prompt to the response, and it tries to find their similarity, the coverage, the accuracy. So there are actual metrics that you can use to evaluate them. And we took it one step further at GDIT. We put this into our Luna platform. We created a learning process. So if it's not a good answer, we will reformulate the query and try again, a better prompt. Or if we're not retrieving the right results, we're grabbing the wrong data set, we'll go to a different data set. So we've got this adaptive RAG that really tamps down hallucinations. We're not the only one. We implemented research papers. So I'm sure every FSI that's doing AI work is going to be doing this as well.
Thank you. I think we had a question over here. Oh, back here, I'm sorry. Yes.
Mick doesn't hallucinate. Joe Early, MetroStar Systems. So talking about RAG architectures, we've seen Vanna, we've seen Project Linchpin coming out for the Army. Reference architecture is the wave of next acquisition cycles for the government. But we're kind of also from industry in this process of transition and learning what that architecture is. What is, for everybody in here, what's missing from those reference architectures? What are you seeing as adoption challenges when it comes to being compliant with what all these other larger organizations are putting out for reference architectures, but still not meeting the mark for what is true adoption and deconfliction of what is a software problem, where everybody's bringing a RAG solution, and there's an infrastructure compliant and rational way to deal with that.
That's a really good question. Keith, you got any insight on that? I'll throw it over.
I mean, I'll probably keep it at a high level. I think part of the challenge when you're talking about the RAG system is what do you have in it, and how do you know that it's all that you need to know, right? So I'm actually going to put in, again, all the HR data behind it. Is there a DoD policy that I should actually have an API hooked up to that's going to draw in more information and more insight into it? The complications of having an open source software with the ability to scan everything but possible hallucinations versus the RAG solution of fine-tuning something, but limiting that to your own governance of what you can control and put in it, then limits, the knowledge that you're going to pull out of it. So I see there's a conflict of like open source versus controlled source, and that's where I think maybe there's a happy medium if you could get the LLM to pull the source and it validated that source into your RAG. That's a possible kind of bridge overall solution we've looked at. But that is I think the biggest conflict is open source versus closed source with a RAG.
I'm not sure I'm getting to the thrust of your question, but I do note that a lot of these solutions are presented as RAG for dummies, like Amazon Q. You just pointed to an S3 bucket. What's behind the scenes there is important. How do you ingest that data? How do you again, technical speak, how do you chunk it, right? How do you break it up into little bits? So when you do a search and a retrieval, you bring back what's relevant. So there's a lot of the technical details that are hidden that need to be made explicit, and that's not happening universally. I don't know if that gets to where you're going.
Do you have any follow-up? No.
There you go.
All right, we should have time for one more question. Gentleman over here.
Hi, you guys talked briefly about the security portion of AI, but I think, you know, I was sort of wondering about things like when you're doing data scraping from websites and things like that. How do you secure those inputs and ensure that, you know, you're not a victim to some sort of like data poisoning or those types of attacks?
You're working on that.
Part of what we're doing, I think, is just starting slow. So we're going about this where the websites that we're looking at, even in the greenhouse effort, we're looking at .gov sites, right? So then we're actually not only looking at those sites, we're contacting the owners of those sites, and then understanding, you know, we're saying like, we're gonna hook up this API with this IP, this is gonna be our connection, your data is good. Then establishing, you know, if something were to happen at your website, we want you to contact us too as well, right? So .gov, communicating what security protocols that we're gonna have, what ports, you know, all the stuff that we do behind the scenes security-wise, and having that person-to-person, yep, you're good today, we're good today.
Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. My name is Ryan from Lionfish Cybersecurity. We're teaching high school students CompTIA right now. And the question is, how do we help them from some of these hardware and security basics to move into a vector of AI? What's a good way to a learning path? Maybe you would have some advice as a mom how to help them learn AI from the basics.
I think we had the same conversation of, you know, we always get the question, or I get the question when we get resumes in, how do I get on this career path? How do I actually, right, like, what am I actually doing to get there? And there's no real, like, it's one of the more difficult questions for me to answer because there's no real true path. Like, it's like, go get a master's degree in AI, right? That's the simple one. But, you know, we're finding that there are students and people coming up, like, all they have to do is really be into YouTube like every day and code, and they're really good. Like they're just professionals at what they do. I think there is a gap within, Keith speaking here, I think there's a gap within the government of, I have to have this degree, I have to have like this, I have to have 24 hours of whatever. And you're like, hold on, let's get, we had a discussion about like a portfolio. Can I see like an e-portfolio of code that you've done and projects? Like, let me see how good you are, and you know, that would bridge the gap. But yeah, educationally, I think we're still stuck in you need X, Y, Z to get into this job.
Yeah, excuse me, I'll echo that. The credentialism can harm us. We're finding college interns in the summer can create software that moves our product lines forward in AI. Again, YouTube, Coursera, the MOOCs. You can get a 10-hour class, a 10-minute class, a 10-week class, a 4-year degree. There's no one answer, but what's underneath it always is like a real curiosity. Kids who want, or people who want to learn, right? Whatever age they are. Turns out a lot of younger kids are super excited by it, to your point. But anyone in this room could go to these resources, free resources, in Google and Kaggle. AWS, Azure, they offer a free year of service to teach yourself tools and techniques. They offer certifications, etc. Lots of paths.
Yeah, I just would say, don't discount those non-IT folks. Like, you can't in this world. I mean, look at your citizen technologists or whatever, where we used to call them shadow IT, and then they're citizen developers, now they're citizen technologists. Really, they're your business enablers, right? And so, you know, leverage that, right? If they have a propensity to learning, if they have a propensity to technology, you know, this isn't a space anymore where you had to, like you said, get credentialed and have all these degrees in order to be effective. And so I think preaching that, and yeah, I will say YouTube, there's a ton of stuff out there, but just like anything else, there's really bad stuff out there too, right? So you've got to weigh that. But in this day and age, I would say if you're talking to somebody young that wants to get into this, having that thirst for knowledge and that drive for knowledge is really what's going to lead you to success.
I would add
Big Ten schools. Purdue's in the house. Ohio State, Illinois, Big Ten.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, before we break for lunch, our